Hi BookTube, it's Amy. It's been a little bit, so I thought we would read some A. Edward Newton. This is Newton's 1931 work titled End Papers, and as you can see it, I've got it here in this somewhat faded orange cloth with no dust jacket. And so we'll open it up here and I'll show you the frontispiece, which is titled The Book Collector Masquerading as Master of Hounds, an imaginary portrait by H.J. Brothers. Newton's books always have very interesting and sometimes colorful frontispieces here. So this is, well, I guess it's 1933, but the copyright is 31 and 33. So technically, I think the work was published in 33, but some of the essays predate 33 and were published in 31 because Newton published many of his essays in his day in literary reviews and in publications like the Atlantic Monthly. So the first work in End Papers is titled Lawyers Were Once Children, or rather, Lawyers Were Children Once, which is a very intriguing title, and I myself have read End Papers before, but I thought, seeing as I want to reread Newton this year, that it would be nice to read a little bit to you here on BookTube. Considering what an everyday young man I am, it is really surprising how many and what pleasant things happen to me. Perhaps it is because I am always ready to meet an agreeable situation a little more than halfway. Some time ago I was dining in London when a man opposite me at a table remarked, "I knew I should meet you sometime. I want to thank you for a pleasant review you once wrote for a book of mine." Now, as I almost never write a book review, I replied that I was afraid I did not deserve his good opinion, and went on to inquire what the book was. "The Old Benchers of the Inner Temple," he told me, and then I remembered that several years before the Saturday Review had sent me a book which had so pleased me that I wrote half a column or so of praise, sent it off, and dismissed the matter entirely from my mind. "I am glad," said my friend, who turned out to be Sir Frank McKinnon, himself an old bencher, "to meet a fellow lamb enthusiast. Some day, when you have time—" "In London I have nothing but time," I interrupted. "Go into the Temple Gardens," he continued, "and stand with your back right against the wall of No. 2 Crown Office Row. Then turn around and look right above your head, and you will see a tablet which I have caused to be erected there. I think you will approve of it. Here is a card," handing me one, "which will open any gate and most doors in the temple. After you have noted the inscription, turn again and look towards the river, and far down across the lawn you will see a little bronze figure of a boy, which you may think of as Charles Lamb. He is looking towards Crown Office Row, the place of his kindly engender. Particularly notice the book he has in his hand, upon the open page of which you will see a quotation from Lamb's essay on the Benchers, which you quoted with excellent effect in your paper, Lawyers Were Children Once. There is before me, as I write, a well-thumbed and badly shaken little volume of the essays of Elia and Elena, which I have owned for more than half a century, and which I always turn to when I want to verify a quotation. Truth compels me to say that the original manuscript of Charles Lamb's exquisite essay, Dream Children, is a more valuable possession, but it was in this little volume, published by Moxon, that I first learned to know and love the author, who wrote for antiquity, he said, and who, as Mr. E.V. Lucas remarked, has become more and more a writer treasured by posterity. And this may be a good place as any to insist publicly upon the merit, the exceeding merit, of Lucas's Life of Charles Lamb. I am not without experience. With Dr. Johnson I can exclaim, "Sir, the biographical part of literature is what I love most." I have read many biographies, and Boswell excepted. One accepts Boswell from force of habit almost. I have no hesitation in saying that Lucas's Lamb is the masterpiece. It has gone into 10 editions, and there should have been 50. May I now print the review of The Old Benchers as it originally appeared, and one for me, a new old friend with whom I have since prowled the streets and courts of his and my beloved London? This is a lovely book. Charles Lamb is always appealing, but how pleased and amazed and amused he would be to think of the great Oxford University Press making into a beautiful and substantial volume his little paper on the old adventures of the Inner Temple, where, as he says, he was born and passed the first 7 years of his life. The best essays are always autobiographical. The creator of the essay, Old Montaigne, taught us that, and Charles Lamb's most delightful papers are those in which he refers to his own experiences. The names of dozens of them spring to our lips. But in essay writing, as Dr. Johnson said of a man writing an epitaph, one is not under oath. The essayist may take a thread of truth and string thereon a pearl, many pearls of fiction, and commentators are frequently misled thereby. I have been told that Lamb's Oxford in Vacation was written not after a visit to Oxford, but after a visit to Cambridge. The story fits one place quite as well as another. Charles made love to several shadowy maidens in his essays that may never have lived at all, and we know, what his contemporaries did not, that he loved and proposed to and was declined by Miss Kelly, she of the divine plain face. And so we who love the choicest cuts of Lamb have always taken his ventures with a grain of salt. Did they all live in the flesh, and did Lamb see them clearly or only in his mind? These questions and many another Sir Frank McKinnon has answered for us and given us little biographies and reproductions of other portraits which make us wish we were a bencher. I might perhaps be mistaken for a wise man did I wear a wig and a robe. Many men are so mistaken. How fully saturated with London Charles Lamb is, and it with him. Only a few weeks since, one moonlit night, I spent an hour wandering in the Temple, thinking of the realities and the shadows which once had habitation there, and of the Shakespeare story of the white rose and the red, and of Tom Pinch and his sister, and John Westlock. Can the fountain which Charles Lamb made to rise and fall many times be the one into which I threw a penny not long ago, as one does in the Trevi fountain at Rome? Hardly, but one fountain is as good as another, if one be not thirsty, and it suggests pleasant memories. How felicitous Lamb in phrase. Example, lawyers, I suppose, were children once. How wonderful his selection of the right word. Example, what a dead thing is a clock with its embowelments of lead. But Lamb is in danger of being somewhat overdone. Thackeray called him a saint. That was silly. Let me not say another word, but this, to end where I began, The Benchers is a lovely book. But delightful essay as The Benchers is, and many others are, none have the whimsical emotion and tender charm of Dream Children. Never before, at least not since the Elizabethans, has the English language been spun into finer fabric than in this essay, especially the last paragraph. Its writing gave Lamb some concern. It is the only paragraph he had occasion to blot. It was written in Lamb's golden year, and the original manuscript of this essay is the Golden Crown of my Lamb collection, which is not a mean one. I obtained the original from Dr. Rosenbach many years ago, on the day when the Germans sank the Listowina. Everything else, including our hearts, sank in consequence. It was hardly a day for successful book hunting, but Harry B. Smith's Sentimental Library had just been put on sale, and one felt that one must rise to the occasion. In the delightful catalogue that he made of his books and manuscripts and letters, he refers to Dream Children as the most expensive item he ever bought. No, I am mistaken. He so refers to it in his books, First Nights and First Editions, and wonders what has become of it. Let this brief paper tell him. The essay was written on a large sheet of India house paper. Holding the original against a strong light, one may see that the first title was not Dream Children, but My Children. Then Lamb, with unerring taste, realized that a bachelor should only have dream children, and changed the title of his essay accordingly. Everyone writing on Charles Lamb has joined in the symphony of praise which this paper has evoked. Canon Ager, once master of the Temple, says, inexpressively touching, when we have learned to penetrate the thin disguise in which he clothes them, are the hoarded memories, the tender regrets which Lamb, writing by his lonely hearth, thus ventured to commit to the uncertain sympathies of the great public. Charles Dickens calls it the most delightful paper, the most charming essay which the tender imagination of Charles Lamb ever conceived. It represents him sitting by his fireside on a winter night, telling stories to his own dear children, delighting in their society, until he suddenly comes to his old, solitary, bachelor self, and finds that they were dream children who might have been, but never were. E.V. Lucas calls Dream Children the most beautiful of all his writings, and again, as though loath to leave the subject, he refers to it as that beautiful tissue of wistful regrets and delicate imaginings. And I'll just show you this image here, which is titled Dream Children, after a drawing by C.E. Brock. This bachelor with these ghost-like children that you could almost see right through. They're transparent. And C.T. Winchester, in a little book of critical essays, has this: only once or twice, perhaps only once, in that most intimate of all his essays, The Dream Children, does Lamb drop all affectations and tell us the things that lay nearest his heart in language too utterly sincere even for the disguise of his self-pleasing quaintness. In that perfect essay humor is quite lost in pathos, and the English in which the simple story is told, for purity of idiom, chaste simplicity, and artless grace of movement, is quite unsurpassed. No one else in Lamb's day wrote such English, and to find anything so perfect, you will have to go back to the best passages of the English Bible. Here Lamb has set up a glass where we may see the inmost part of him. The essay was originally printed in the London Magazine for January 1822 and appeared in book form the following year in the famous Elias series in 2 volumes. Glancing at the table of contents of the first volume, we see the board in richest commonality spread: the South Sea House, Oxford in Vacation, Grace Before Meat, Poor Relations, Mrs. Battle, and many more. To read the titles is like hearing the music of a well-known hymn. The words come to one: a fine fire, a clear fire, a clean hearth, and the rigor of the game. Old Sarah Battle, now with God, the old benchers of the Inner Temple, and this brings me back to my old bencher, Sir Frank McKinnon, not yet with God. And so that is the end of that first essay in here, and it was through reading the works of Newton and other contemporary essayists that I myself was led to read some of the writings of Charles Lamb, because Newton really just takes you on to other writers. It's impossible to read Newton without coming up with a list of books that you'd like to purchase and buy and read. But I will end the video there, so I hope you enjoyed that.